Let's go back to 1992 and the crash unit. Explain from the best to your knowledge and your eyes back then. Explain to everybody what the crash unit was, and if you can even dive into a little history of why they were created and things like that, that would be dope as well.
So my knowledge of C.R.A.S.H was that it was a special task force, a gang task force in the LAPD that began in the 1980s, right, late 1980s, around the time when DARE program and all that stuff was out. Say no to dope. The commercials were on TV. This is your brain on drugs, right? And so what it was the most kick-ass cops in each division. They would come out at the 2:00 shift change, right? They'd come out and there'd be 4 deep, 2 in the front seat, 2 in the back seat. When they pull up, the doors are already cracked for them to jump out the car. So they was the jump out boys, right? And they just pressed. They pressed us hard, man. They pressed hard. And then we had the LA sheriffs who were also doing overlap in their district. We had the Stony Boys from Firestone Division that would come through the neighborhood, and they were the same way. I mean, they're jumping out in blue jeans, a windbreaker, and running shoes. You gonna have a track meet today, you know? So it was a press, you know what I mean? And what they were doing is called broken windows policing, where they would try to arrest you for the smallest offense and figuring even if we put you away on a small offense, we can prevent a greater offense like a violent crime from taking place. So they were very aggressive about the most pettiest of things. You know, any opportunity they got to take us to juvenile hall or to the county jail, you're going down. You're going. Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Damn. You know, it was a rough time back in those times. I think 93, 94, we had upwards of 2,500 homicides in Los Angeles. Really crazy time, man. What do you say to people, and civilians were really upset about this at the time, so they were siding with some of the tactics that the police were using if it got the gang off the street, because people were being terrorized in their own community. What would you say, even looking back in hindsight, to people who think that, you know, they were going these extra measures because, you know, they were fighting a big gang problem and they had to, you know, do what they had to do to get it under control?
Well, you know, that's a debate that's often had in prison and in the jails. Like, is it right for the police to break the law to put people away who breaking the law? Is it all right to fight fire with fire, so to speak? Right? And a lot of the stuff that went on during that time, I personally seen was highly questionable at the least and reprehensible at worst. Right? Stuff like, I had homeboys, older homeboys, that would get picked up. They would take them into a Crip neighborhood, kick them off the police car, bump the lights, whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
So that they know that he's out there and take off. Leave him stranded. This happened more than once to people from our community.
Yeah.
In the era of the 90s, after the ceasefire, it didn't go the way that they thought it would go. What ended up happening is the homie ended up getting a ride by so-called enemies and dropped off in the neighborhood safely. Like, you know, because these people, these so-called criminals and gang members, had come together and developed a code that we're not going to hurt one another to advance the agenda of another. You know what I mean? So people in the community that I was in, the Pueblo Del Rio Housing Project, it's a different kind of thing. You know, we as criminals didn't particularly perpetuate crimes against residents in that housing project. Those weren't the target.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Keep in mind, though, there were GTAs. We didn't have any problems stealing cars in the neighborhood. We didn't have problems selling drugs in the neighborhood. So we were a public nuisance, but these people were not targeted for violent crimes. So their sentiment wasn't always with law enforcement. Oftentimes it was the opposite, because the people that's getting took to jail is their father, their brother, their son, their nephew, their daughter, so on and so forth. So it was more of a community thing, you know, residents that were the targets in these other communities where this gang would go perpetuate crimes felt differently. Yeah, lock them up and throw away the key. They killed somebody over here. They robbed somebody over here, so on and so forth. So it's just a funny dynamic like that. The home, no, we don't like the police. We don't like the way they police across the track. The other side of the land, lock them all up.
Before we go, I want to just put a disclaimer out there. First of all, I want to thank everybody for joining the show, and I want to let everyone know that this is Ali's story from his point of view, and we're telling his story from beginning to end on this new show called Walking It Down. And I just want people to not get the wrong idea. We're not glorifying gangbanging. We're not glorifying the street life. We are just telling someone's story, and there will be good times, there will be bad times, but just know that at the end of the day, and I'm sure Ali would agree with me on this, that gangbanging is what led him to prison. So at the end of the day, we just want you to know that, you know, there are only usually a few options for you, a couple of options if you continue to run the streets. Is that safe to say? Can I speak for both of us on that, Ali?
Absolutely, man. Gangbanging is so deceptive. As a child, I had no idea how it would end, right? And as a young adult, I started to get a picture of how it was going to end. And then by the time it got to the end, it was none of the above. I ended up with 4 life sentences in prison as a convicted criminal and gang member. That's the retirement plan for gang members.
Thank you for saying that. Let's continue the story. Last time we left off, you were jumped in. You're now officially part of the gang. So what's next for you? Do you go harder in the streets? You know, were you already going super hard? What's next now that you are officially part of the gang?
Really, nothing changed in the early stages at 13 and 14 years old. I was still doing the things that I was doing before I was in the gang, hanging with my home.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Hanging with my childhood friends, my homeboys, going to the park, playing basketball, going to the swimming pool, you know, doing the same things that I was doing before I joined the gang. So it subtly creeped up on me. You know, I didn't join the gang and then the next day I went out to try to kill somebody or do some violent crime. I was just regular program, the same thing I had been doing, right? And then slowly over the years, different little things start to creep in into my life. Drug dealing, robbery, you know what I mean? Violent crime. It was a progression. It wasn't just okay, yesterday you wasn't in the gang, you was a good kid. Today you get jumped in and all of a sudden you the baddest dude in the neighborhood. It didn't unfold that way for me, right? And that's how I was pulled deeper into it over the years until I got so deep that it was impossible to get out of.